trying to speak
Good? All praises. Well, first and foremost, we're going to start off by giving all praises, all honor, all glory to the Most High God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob through his only begotten Son, Jesus the Christ. Secondly, I want to say to all of my brothers, all of my sisters out there, Shalom, greetings. My name is Chief Priest Lithiyel ben Israel.
Shalom. My name is Priest Ron ben Israel.
And we are with the Holy Nation of Israel. And we are back again with another class, with another topic. But before we begin, I want all of my peoples out there to get your Bibles, get your Apocryphas, read along with us if you can. Also, get your notebooks, get your pens, get your paper, get your pencils, and take notes if it is in your spirit. Lord's will, this will be an edifying class that I am going to entitle Hanukkah, the dedication, the Feast of Lights. And before we get into the scriptures, I want to go here into the Bible dictionary, right here, to the Bible dictionary, and I want to get the definition, or I want to see what Hanukkah, the dedication, the Feast of Lights is about. This is on page 352. It says, the Feast of Lights was observed for 8 days, beginning on the 25th day of Kislev, our December. So they say Kislev is the month of December. In the Bible, you're not going to find the word December. Kislev is the 9th month of the year. Kislev is also known as Kaselu. Kaselu. Matter of fact, let's get that definition real quick. Let's get that definition. We're going to go to page 573 in the same book. It says Kislev, or Kislev, also known as Chaselu, the 9th month of the Hebrew ritual year. And Kislev, or Chaselu, is the 9th month of the year. Matter of fact, to prove that, read Zechariah 7 real quick.
The book of Zechariah chapter 7 and verse 1.
Uh-huh.
And it came to pass in the 4th year of King Darius that the word of the Lord came unto Zechariah in the 4th day of the 9th month, even in Kaselu.
In the 4th day of the 9th month, even in Kaselu. Kaselu was also called Kislev. So I'm going to read this definition again for the Feast of Lights. It says the Feast of Lights was observed for 8 days, beginning on the 25th day of Kislev, which is the 9th month of the year. It was instituted by Judas Maccabeus in 164 BC, when the temple, which had been defiled by Antiochus Epiphanes, king of Syria, was cleansed and rededicated to the service of the Lord. So Hanukkah, the Feast of Dedication, the Feast of Lights, is a time where we remember the rededication of the temple by Judas Maccabeus and the other men that fought along Judas Maccabeus against the Greeks. Now let's go ahead and get into the class. Let's open up in Daniel chapter 8. Daniel chapter 8, and let's start at verse 1.
Book of Daniel chapter 8 and verse 1.
Read.
In the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared unto me.
Belshazzar, the name Belshazzar means may Bel protect the king. Belshazzar was king over Babylon. Just to prove that, give me Daniel 7 and 1 real quick.
The book of Daniel chapter 7 and verse 1.
Uh-huh.
In the 1st year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon.
Belshazzar was king over Babylon. He was also a son of Nebuchadnezzar. Prove that real quick. Give me Daniel chapter 5. Daniel 5, 1 and 2.
The book of Daniel chapter 5 verse 1.
Uh-huh.
Belshazzar the king made a great feast to 1,000 of his lords.
Read.
and drank wine before the 1,000.
Read.
Belshazzar, whilst he tasted the wine, commanded to bring the golden and silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar
Read.
had taken out of the temple, which was in Jerusalem.
So Belshazzar, the king of Babylon, was a son of Nebuchadnezzar. To be more specific, he was the grandson of Nebuchadnezzar. Read the annotation in your Bible next to Father.
Father. In my Bible, grandfather.
Nebuchadnezzar was the grandfather to Belteshazzar. Let's go back to the book of Daniel chapter 8, verse 1 again.
The book of Daniel chapter 8, verse 1. In the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared unto me, even unto me, Daniel, after that which appeared unto me at the first.
After the vision he had in chapter 7. Keep reading.
And I saw in a vision, and it came to pass, when I saw, that I was at Shushan, in the palace.
In the palace, read.
Which is in the province of Elam.
Which is in the province of Elam. Elam was Persia. Modern day Iran. Shushan, which at this point was in possession of the Babylonians, which later on would fall into the possession of the Persians and Medes. Shushan was the capital of Elam. It was one of the capitals of Persia and Media. When you read about Nehemiah, when you read about Esther, they were both in Shushan. Matter of fact, hold this. Give me Esther chapter 1 and verse 2 real quick just to prove that. In the time of the Persians and the Medes, Shushan was the capital of Persia. That's where all the kings ruled from. Give me that real quick. Esther 1 and 2.
The book of Esther chapter 1 verse 2. That in those days when the king Ahasuerus
read.
sat on the throne of his kingdom, which was in Shushan.
Which was in Shushan. Is that in the verse?
The palace.
Which was in Shushan, the palace. In the time of Esther, in the time of the Persians and the Medes, Shushan was the capital. Go back to Daniel chapter 8 and read verse 2 again.
The book of Daniel chapter 8 verse 2. And I saw in a vision, and it came to pass, when I saw that I was at Shushan, in the palace, which is in the province of Elam.
Read.
And I saw in a vision, and I was by the river of Ulai.
Read.
Then I lifted up my eyes and saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram, which had 2 horns, and the 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last.
So what does this ram represent? Give me verse 20 in the same chapter.
Verse 20. The ram which thou sawest, having 2 horns, are the kings of Media and Persia.
The ram which thou sawest having 2 horns was the kings of Media and Persia. The kingdoms of Media and Persia. Go back to verse 3 again real quick.
Verse 3. Then I lifted up my eyes and saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram which had 2 horns.
Read.
And the 2 horns were high.
Remember, this represents the kingdoms of Media and Persia. The kings of Media and Persia. Read.
But one was higher than the other.
One horn was higher than the other. Read.
And the higher came up last.
The horn that was higher than the other horn, the horn that came up last, is talking about Persia. Persia was greater than Media. Matter of fact, I'm going to go to Wikipedia, and I'm going to read this real quick. It's Wikipedia Media region. I'm going to go down. It says history under the Medes. It says in 678 BC, somebody united the Median tribes of Media and made the first Iranian empire. His grandson, Cyaxares, managed to unite all Iranian tribes of ancient Iran and made his empire a major power. When Cyaxares died, he was succeeded by his son, Astyages, who was the last king of the Median Empire. In 553 BC, Cyrus the Great, also known as Cyrus II, king of Persia, rebelled against his grandfather, the Median king, Astyages. Remember, when we read Daniel chapter 8 and verse 8 and 20, it said the 2 horns represent the 2 kings of Media and Persia. Those 2 kings, the king of Media was Astyages. He was the last king over Media. The king over Persia, which came up last, is talking about Cyrus the Great, also known as Cyrus II. It says in 553 BC, Cyrus the Great, king of Persia, rebelled against his grandfather, the Median king, Astyages, son of Cyaxares. He finally won a decisive victory in 550 BC, resulting in Astyages' capture by his own dissatisfied nobles, who promptly turned him over to the triumphant Cyrus. After Cyrus's victory against Astyages, the Medes were subjected to their close kin, the Persians. The Persians were greater than the Medes. The Persians represent that last horn that came up the highest. Let's go back to Daniel chapter 8 and let's read verse 4.
Verse 4. I saw the ram pushing westward and northward and southward, so that no beast might stand before him.
So that no beast might stand before him, no nation. Can you read?
Neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand.
Read.
But he did according to his will.
So this ram did according to his will. What does this ram represent? What does this ram represent? Keep reading, matter of fact.
And became great. And as I was considering, behold.
Where we at?
Verse 5.
Read it again. Read verse 5 again.
Verse 5. And as I was considering, behold, an he-goat came from the west on the face of the whole earth, and touched not the ground.
Read.
And the goat had a notable horn between his eyes.
So who or what does this goat represent? And what does this notable horn represent? Go over to verse 21 for me real quick.
Verse 21. And the rough goat is the king of Greece.
So the rough goat represents the kingdom of Greece. Keep reading.
And the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king.
And the great horn that's between his eyes is the first king. Hold this. Give me 1 Maccabees chapter 1 and verse 1. The first king is talking about Alexander the Greek. He reigned first over Greece. He was the first Caucasian to reign over Greece, a united Greece. 1 Maccabees chapter 1 and verse 1.
The book of 1 Maccabees chapter 1 verse 1. And it happened after that Alexander, son of Philip, the Macedonian.
Philip the Macedonian. This is Philip the second. Keep reading.
Who came out of the land of Shittim.
Read.
Had smitten Darius, king of the Persians.
He has smitten Darius, the king of the Persians and the Medes. Darius the third. Darius the third. Alexander won battle or defeated Darius the third in war, beginning at the battle of Isu. You can read about that on Wikipedia. Keep reading.
That he reigned in his stead, the first over Greece.
Alexander reigned as the first over Greece. He was king over Greece, a united Greece. Keep reading.
And made many wars, and won many strongholds, and slew the kings of the earth.
Read.
And went through to the ends of the earth, and took spoils of many nations, insomuch that the earth was quite quiet before him.
Read.
Whereupon he was exalted, and his heart was lifted up.
Meaning he got full of pride. Read.
And he gathered a mighty strong host,
A mighty strong army. Read.
and ruled over countries, and nations, and kings, who became tributaries unto him.
Meaning kings had to pay taxes, give him gifts. Keep reading.
And after these things, he fell sick,
After these things, Alexander the Greek got sick. Keep reading.
and perceived that he should die.
And perceived he would die. Read.
Wherefore he called his servants, such as were honorable,
So he called his servants, such as were honorable men in his eyes. Read.
and had been brought up with him from his youth,
Read.
and parted his kingdom among them,
He parted his kingdom among his honorable servants. Read.
while he was yet alive.
While he was alive. Read.
So Alexander reigned 12 years, and then died. And his servants bare rule, every one in his place.
Everyone in his place. Read.
And after his death, they all put crowns upon themselves.
After the death of Alexander, his servants all crowned themselves king. Read.
So did their sons after them many years.
Read.
And evils
And what?
And evils were multiplied in the earth.
When the white man came into power, the Bible says evils were multiplied in the earth. The world became even more evil than what it was before. Keep reading.
And there came out of them a wicked root.
And there came out of them a wicked root. Read.
Antiochus, surnamed
Epiphanes.
Epiphanes.
Antiochus, surname Epiphanes. The word Epiphanes means God manifested on earth. Antiochus Epiphanes is Antiochus the fourth. Keep reading.
Son of Antiochus the king, who had been in hostage at Rome.
He was son of Antiochus the third, who was held hostage at Rome. Read.
And he reigned in the 137th year
Antiochus the fourth, he reigned in the 137th year. Read.
of the kingdom of the Greeks.
Of the kingdom of the Greeks. Let's go back to the book of Daniel chapter 8. Daniel chapter 8, and let's read verse 5.
The book of Daniel chapter 8 verse 5. And as I was considering, behold, an he-goat came from the west on the face of the whole earth.
This he-goat represents Greece. Can you read?
and touched not the ground.
And he touched not the ground, meaning no man could lay him down. Read.
And the goat had a notable horn between his eyes.
This notable horn between his eyes is the first king, Alexander the Greek. Read.
And he came to the ram that had two horns.
Remember, the ram that had two horns is talking about the kingdoms of Media and Persia. Keep reading.
Which I had seen standing before the river, and ran unto him in the fury of his power.
Read.
And I saw him come close unto the ram, and he was moved with choler against him,
He hated the Persians and the Medes. Alexander hated Media and Persia. Read.
and smote the ram.
And he smote the ram. He defeated them in war. Remember, he smote Darius III. He defeated Darius III. Keep reading.
And brake his two horns.
And broke both of those kingdoms, Persia and Media. Read.
And there was no power in the ram to stand before him. But he cast him down to the ground.
He cast him down to the ground, meaning he was made a servant. Persia and Media became tributaries. Read.
And stamped upon him. And there was none that could deliver the ram out of his hand.
Keep reading.
Therefore the he-goat waxed very great. And when he was strong,
read.
the great horn was broken.
Alexander died. Alexander died at the peak of his powers. Read.
For it came up for notable ones.
And for it came up four notable ones, or four honorable ones. Read that part again.
And for it came up four notable ones toward the four winds of heaven.
Keep reading.
And out of one of them came forth a little horn.
And out of one of them came forth a little horn. This little horn is Antiochus IV, Antiochus Epiphanes. He came forth out of the Seleucid dynasty, because those four horns, or those four notable horns, because I forgot to mention that, those were the four most notable generals of Alexander the Greek's army. You had Ptolemy, Lysimachus, Cassander, and Seleucus. Out of those four, out of Seleucus, came forth Antiochus Epiphanes IV, or Antiochus IV. Hey, read verse 9 again.
Verse 9. And out of the one of them came forth a little horn, which waxed exceedingly great.
Read.
Toward the south.
He waxed towards the south, that's towards Egypt. Read.
And toward the east.
And towards Persia. Read.
And toward the pleasant land.
And towards the pleasant land. That's talking about Israel. It's talking about Jerusalem. Keep reading.
And it waxed great, even to the host of heaven.
Even to the host of heaven, talking about the Israelites, the three tribes of Judah, Benjamin, and Levi. That's the host of heaven. Read.
And it cast down some of the host and of the stars to the ground.
Yeah, they became servants, tributaries. Read.
And stamped upon them.
And stamped upon them. Read.
Yea, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host.
This little horn, Antiochus IV, Antiochus Epiphanes, he magnified himself even unto the prince of hosts. Read.
And by him the daily sacrifice was taken away.
And he took away the daily sacrifice. Those sacrifices we made in the morning, those sacrifices we made at evening. He took those things away. Keep reading.
And the place of his sanctuary was cast down.
And the place of the sanctuary was cast down. Read.
And a host was given him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression.
That host is wicked Israelites, wicked Jews. Read.
And it cast down the truth to the ground. And it practiced and prospered.
Hey, give me verse 24 real quick.
Verse 24. And his power shall be mighty.
Talking about this little horn, Antiochus IV. His power shall be mighty. Read.
But not by his own power.
But it's not by his own power. Read.
And he shall destroy wonderfully.
Read.
And shall prosper and practice.
Read.
And shall destroy the mighty and the holy people.
The host of heaven, the mighty and holy people, the Israelites. Read.
And through his policy also he shall cause craft to prosper in his land, in his hand. And he shall magnify himself in his heart. And be peace shall destroy. And by peace shall destroy me.
He shall magnify himself in his heart. He called himself Epiphanes. He said that he is God manifested on the earth. This man magnified himself in his own heart. And it says, and by peace shall destroy many. Read.
He shall also stand up against the prince of princes.
He shall stand up against the prince of princes, the prince of the host. Keep reading.
But he shall be broken without hand.
But he shall be broken without hand. Let's read about that real quick. Give me 2 Maccabees 9. It says he shall stand up against the prince of hosts, the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without hand. 2 Maccabees 9, let's start at 1. So that you don't have that? 2 Maccabees 9, let's start at 1. Oh, bet. Yeah, 2 Maccabees chapter 9. We're going to start at 1 so we know exactly who this is talking about.
The book of 2 Maccabees chapter 9 and verse 1.
Read.
About that time came Antiochus with dishonor out of the country of Persia.
So we're talking about Antiochus. This is Antiochus IV, Antiochus Epiphanes. Jump down to verse 5.
Verse 5. But the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, smote him with an incurable and invisible plague.
So the Lord God Almighty, the God of Israel, smote Antiochus IV with an incurable and invisible plague, a sickness, illness, yo. Read.
For as soon as he had spoken these words,
remember, Antiochus said he would go to Jerusalem and make it a burying place for the Jews. He would go to Jerusalem and make Jerusalem a cemetery, a graveyard for the men and women of Judah. That's what he said. Keep reading.
a pain of the bowels that were
Where we at? Where we at?
verse 5.
It says, a pain of the bowels that was remediless came upon him. Keep reading.
And sore torment of the inner part.
So soon as he spoke those words, the Lord struck him with incurable and invisible sickness, pain in the bowels. There was no remedy. And it was sore and it was torments in his inner part. Soon as he said he's going to go to Jerusalem and make it a graveyard of the Jews, the Lord touched him. Broke him without hands. Hey, jump down to verse 7.
Verse 7. Howbeit, he nothing at all ceased from his bragging.
But still, even with all that, he kept bragging, kept running his mouth. Keep reading.
But still was filled with pride.
And he was still filled with pride. He still thought he was God, manifested on earth. Keep reading.
Breathing out fire in his rage against the Jews. And commanding to haste the journey.
So he was commanding to haste the journey. He was trying to get to Jerusalem as fast as possible. Read.
But it came to pass that he fell down from his chariot. Cried violently.
Carried violently. So he fell off of his chariot while his chariot was moving fast, hitting rocks, rocking back and forth. He fell right out that chariot, yo. Keep reading.
So that having a sore fall, all the members of his body were much pain.
And that was a terrible fall out of that chariot. He was in a lot of pain throughout his whole body. What verse are we in?
Verse 8.
Keep reading.
And thus he that a little afore thought he might command the waves of the sea. So proud was he beyond the condition of man.
Remember, this man thought he was God manifested on earth. He thought he could control the waves of the sea. He thought he could tell a tsunami stop in the name of love or something like that. Keep reading.
Or do like Moses do, make the sea split.
Think it. He like Moses. Bring it out. Keep reading.
And weigh the high mountains in a balance.
He thought he can weigh the high mountains in a balance. Read.
Was now cast on the ground.
Now this man was cast to the ground. Read.
And carried in horse litter.
And they had to carry him in a horse litter. Yo, read.
Showing forth unto all the manifest power of God.
That was the manifest power of God that touched him. He was broken without hands. Keep reading.
So that the worms rose up out of the body of this wicked man.
Worms started coming out of this man's body. Read.
And whilst he lived in sorrow and pain.
And as he lived, he was in sorrow and he was in pain all throughout his body. Read.
His flesh fell away.
His flesh started to fall away, started to rot. Read.
And the filthiness of his smell was noisome to all his army.
And he stank. And the smell, everybody could smell it, yo. Everybody. It was disgusting. Go ahead, bring it up.
That's that walking zombie right there.
Yeah. Where we at?
Verse 10.
Jump down to 11.
Verse 11. Here therefore, being plagued,
Read.
he began to leave off his great pride.
He left off that great pride. He knew he was not Epiphanes. He knew he wasn't God manifested on earth. Read.
And to come to the knowledge of himself by the scourge of God.
Read.
His pain increasing every moment.
Read.
And when he himself could not abide in his own smell, he said these words.
Let's see what he said. Read.
It is meet to be subject unto God.
It is meet to be subject unto God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Read.
And that a man that is mortal.
Antiochus IV was a man, a mortal man. Can you read?
Should not proudly think of himself as if he were God.
He learned not to think of himself as God. He learned not to think of himself as God manifested on earth. Hey, let's go back to Daniel chapter 8. Daniel chapter 8 and verse 13.
The book of Daniel chapter 8 and verse 13. Then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto the certain saint, unto that certain saint,
Read.
which spake, how long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice,
Read.
and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden underfoot?
So he said, I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto that certain saint which spake. Who are these saints? Who is this saint that was speaking? Give me Maccabees. First Maccabees. First Maccabees chapter I'm in Second Maccabees. First Maccabees, chapter 3 and verse 1. And let's read down.
The book of First Maccabees, chapter 3, and verse 1. Then his son, Judas, called Maccabeus, rose up in his stead, and all his brethren helped him.
You know what? Chapter 2 and verse 1, excuse me.
Book of First Maccabees, chapter 2, and verse 1. In those days arose Mattathias, the son of John,
He was the son of John. Mattathias was a Levite. Read.
the son of Simeon, a priest of the sons of Jarib, from Jerusalem, and dwelt in Modin.
Read.
And he had 5 sons, Joanne, called
Caddis.
Simon, called
Thassi. Read.
Judas, who was called Maccabeus,
Judas, who was called Maccabeus, meaning he was called Judas the Hammer. Can you read?
Eleazar, called Aram, and Jonathan, whose surname was
Apis. Read.
And when he saw the blasphemies that were committed in Judah
When Mattathias saw the blasphemies that were committed in Judah, read,
and Jerusalem,
and in Jerusalem, read.
he said, Woe is me,
He said, woe is me, read.
wherefore was I born to see this misery of my people,
Why was I born to see this misery of my people, read.
and of the holy city,
And of the holy city, Jerusalem, read.
and to dwell there,
Uh-huh.
when it was delivered into the hand of the enemy,
Read.
and the sanctuary into the hand of strangers.
In the sanctuary into the hand of strangers. Jump down to 13.
Verse 13. To what end, therefore, shall we live any longer?
How long? This saint is asking, how long? You know, that's what Daniel was saying. Go back to Daniel chapter 8. And give me verse 11 again real quick.
The book of Daniel chapter 8 and verse 11. Yea, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host.
Talking about Antiochus. This little horn. Read.
And by him the daily sacrifice was taken away. And the place of his sanctuary was cast down.
And the place of his sanctuary was cast down. Keep reading.
Verse 12. And an host was given him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression. And it cast down the truth to the ground. And it practiced and prospered.
Give me chapter 11. Chapter 11 and verse 31.
The book of Daniel chapter 11 and verse 31. In arms shall stand on his part.
When you read Daniel chapter 11, you're reading about the king of the north versus the king of the south. The king of the south, talking about Ptolemy. The king of the north, dealing with the Seleucid dynasty, the Seleucid empire. Read verse 31 again.
Verse 31. And the arms shall stand on his part.
Meaning militaries shall stand on his part. Talking about on the side of the king of the north. This is talking about Antiochus Epiphanes again. Antiochus Epiphanes the fourth. Keep reading.
And they shall pollute the sanctuary of strength.
He said they shall pollute the sanctuary of strength. Read.
And shall take away the daily sacrifice. And they shall place the abomination that maketh desolate.
And they shall place the abomination that maketh desolate. Read it one more time for me real quick.
Verse 31. In arms shall stand on his part. And they shall pollute the sanctuary of strength.
And they shall pollute the sanctuary of strength. When you go into that word pollute, it means to profane, defile, pollute, desecrate, begin. It says ritually or sexually. Give me that in 2 Maccabees 6. 2 Maccabees chapter 6. And let's start at verse 1.
The book of 2 Maccabees chapter 6 and verse 1. Not long after this, the king sent an old man of
Athens
to compel the Jews to depart from the laws of their fathers.
The king is talking about King Antiochus IV. Keep reading.
And not to live after the laws of God.
Keep reading.
And to pollute also the temple in Jerusalem.
And to pollute also the temple in Jerusalem. Keep reading.
And to call it the temple of Jupiter.
They said now we're going to call it the temple of Jupiter Olympius. Read.
Olympius. And that in
Gerizim
of Jupiter, the defender of strangers, as they did desire that dwelt in the place.
Keep reading.
Verse 3. The coming in of the mischief was sore and grievous to the people.
Keep reading.
For the temple was filled with riot.
The temple was filled with riot. They talking about partying. Partying, read.
And revelings.
And revelings, read.
By the Gentiles.
By who?
By the Gentiles.
By the Gentiles. Rioting and reveling all throughout the temple. Keep reading.
Who dallied with harlots.
They dallied with harlots. They polluted and profaned the temple. And even sexually. Because they were dabbling with harlots throughout the temple. Keep reading.
And had to do with women within the circuit of the holy places.
And they were dealing with women in the circuit of the holy places, meaning all around the temple. All around the temple, they were dealing with women, dealing with harlots. polluting the temple sexually. Read.
And besides that, brought in things that were not lawful.
They brought in things that were not lawful, like the abomination that maketh desolate. Keep reading.
The altar also was filled with profane things, which the law forbiddeth.
Which the law forbiddeth. Go back to the book of Daniel chapter 11, and I want to read 31 again.
The book of Daniel chapter 11 verse 31. And arms shall stand on his part,
Read.
and they shall pollute the sanctuary of strength.
They're going to pollute the sanctuary of strength. They would defile it. They would pollute it. Ritually and sexually. Keep reading.
And shall take away the daily sacrifice.
And take away the daily sacrifice. That daily sacrifice, talking about the morning sacrifice and evening sacrifice. Read.
And they shall place the abomination that maketh desolate.
And they shall place the abomination that makes desolate. Read.
And such as do wickedly against the covenant shall he corrupt by flatteries.
He's going to deceive them through flatteries. Read.
But the people that do know their God shall be strong.
Read.
And do exploits.
And shall do exploits. So the people that know their God, they shall be strong and they shall do exploits, meaning they're going to take action. They're going to fight against this king. Who is this king? The king of the north, Antiochus Epiphanes, Antiochus the fourth. And the people that did know their God is talking about the Hasmonean dynasty. It's talking about the sons of Mattathias. Those sons that we read about in 1 Maccabees chapter 2. It said that they did exploits. Give me the book of 1 Maccabees 3 real quick. 1 Maccabees chapter 3, I want to start at 25.
The book of 1 Maccabees chapter 3 verse 25.
Read.
Then began the fear of Judas and his brethren, and an exceedingly great dread, to fall upon the nations round about them.
So all of the nations round about Judas and his brethren, the men that fought with Judas, all the nations heard about their wars, and they began to be afraid. Keep reading.
And so much as his fame
As his
came-
what?
As his fame.
And so much as his fame. These men knew God, and they were doing exploits. They were famous. Read it again.
And so much as his fame came unto the king.
Came unto the king, King Antiochus the fourth. Read.
And all nations talked of the battles of Judas.
And all nations talked of the battle of Judas. These men did exploits. These men did exploits. Now, let's go to 1 Maccabees chapter 4, and let's start at verse 41.
The book of 1 Maccabees chapter 4 verse 41. Then Judas appointed certain men to fight against those that were in the fortress,
Read.
until he had cleansed the sanctuary.
Until he had cleansed the sanctuary. Read.
So he chose priests of blameless
Conversation.
such as had pleasure in the law,
Such as had pleasure in the law. Read.
who cleansed the sanctuary, and bare out the defiled stones into an unclean place. And when, as they consulted what to do with the altar of burnt offerings, which was profane, they thought it best to pull it down.
It said what to do with the burnt, what it say? What to do with the altar of burnt offerings, which was profane. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about the altar of burnt offerings, which was profaned. Which was profane. Keep reading.
They thought it best to pull it down,
They thought it best to pull it down. Read.
lest it should be a reproach to them,
Keep reading.
because the heathen had defiled it. Wherefore they pulled it down,
Keep reading.
and laid up the stones in the mountain of the temple in the convenient place, until there should come a prophet to show what should be done with them.
There was no prophet at this time. There was no prophet of the Lord at this time. So they just put those defiled stones up and waited until a prophet would come and tell them what to do. Keep reading.
Then they took whole stones according to the law,
Then they took whole stones according to the law. Read.
and built a new altar according to the former.
Get the law real quick. Deuteronomy 27. Deuteronomy chapter 27 and verse 4. I'm going to read 4 through 6.
The book of Deuteronomy chapter 27 and verse 4. Therefore it shall be, when ye be gone over Jordan, that ye shall set up these stones, which I command you this day, in Mount Ebal,
Yep.
and thou shalt plaster them with plaster.
Keep reading.
And there shalt thou build an altar unto the Lord thy God, an altar of stones. Thou shalt not lift up any iron tool upon them.
So when they were building this altar, they didn't lift up any iron tool to build it. Read.
Thou shalt build the altar of the Lord thy God of whole stones.
And the altar had to be built of whole stones. Read.
And thou shalt offer burnt offerings thereon unto the Lord thy God.
So go back to the book of 1 Maccabees chapter 4. And read verse 47 one more time, and then I want to jump down.
The book of 1 Maccabees, chapter 4, verse 47. Then they took whole stones according to the law.
They took whole stones according to the law. According to the law, the altar of the Lord was to be made or built out of whole stones. Keep reading.
And built a new altar according to the former.
And they built a new altar according to the former altar. Jump down to 54 for me.
Verse 54. Look at what time and what day the heathen had profaned it.
Let's take a look at what time the heathen had profaned it. Give me 1 Maccabees chapter 1 and verse 59.
The book of 1 Maccabees, chapter 1 and verse 59.
Read.
Now the 25th day of the month, they did sacrifice upon the idol altar, which was upon the altar of God.
So the heathen profaned the altar of God on the 25th day of the month. The 25th day of the month. Let's go back to 1 Maccabees 4 and let's read let's jump down to verse 59. Matter of fact, excuse me, 54, we'll read down.
Verse 54. Look at what time and what day the heathen had profaned it.
The heathen had profaned the altar on the 25th day. Read.
Even in that was it dedicated with songs.
Read.
In
cisterns,
in harps,
and cymbals. Read.
Then all the people fell upon their faces, worshiping and praising the God of the heathen,
the God of heaven,
who had given them good success.
Who had given them good success against the Greeks. Read.
And so they kept the dedication of the altar 8 days.
So they kept the dedication of the altar 8 days. Keep reading.
And offered burnt offerings with gladness, and sacrificed the sacrifice and deliverance and praise.
And they sacrificed the sacrifice of deliverance and praise. Verse 59.
Verse 59. Moreover, Judas and his brethren, with the whole congregation of Israel, ordained,
or they commanded, or they ordered what?
Ordained that the days of the dedication of the altar should be kept in their season, from year to year, by the space of 8 days, from the 25th day of the month Caselu, with mirth and gladness.
With mirth and with gladness. With mirth and with gladness. Well, we almost finished, but before we finish, I want to get this real quick. Give me 2 Maccabees. 2 Maccabees chapter 1 and verse 9 real quick.
The book of 2 Maccabees chapter 1 and verse 9.
Read.
And now see that ye keep the feast of tabernacles in the month Caselu.
Now see that you keep the feast of tabernacles in the month Caselu. See that you keep the feast of tabernacles in the month Caselu. What is this talking about when this is talking about the tabernacles? Is this talking about the actual tabernacles? Well, let's find out. When or what month do we keep the actual tabernacles? Give me Leviticus 23, start at 42, I think it is.
The book of Leviticus chapter 23, verse 42. You shall dwell in booths 7 days. All that are Israelites.
No, that's not the right one. Start at verse 34 then, or is it 33?
Verse 34.
Start at 33.
Verse 33. That your generations may know.
Leviticus 23 and 33.
The book of Leviticus chapter 23, verse 33. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying.
Saying what?
Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, the 15th day of this 7th month.
The 15th day of this 7th month, read.
Shall be the feast of tabernacles, for 7 days unto the Lord.
So the feast of tabernacles falls on the 15th day of the 7th month. Keep reading.
On the first day shall be a holy convocation.
Read.
You shall do no servile work therein.
Keep reading.
7 days ye shall offer an offering made by fire unto the Lord. On the 8th day.
On what day?
On the 8th day.
Read.
Shall be a holy convocation unto you. And ye shall offer an offering made by fire unto the Lord. It is a solemn assembly. And ye shall do no servile work therein.
So, go back to the book of 2 Maccabees chapter 1 and verse 9.
The book of 2 Maccabees chapter 1. And verse 9. And now see that ye keep the feast of tabernacles in the month Caselu.
And now see that you keep the feast of tabernacles in the month Caselu. We know that we keep the feast of tabernacles in the 7th month. Now, what is the month Caselu? If anybody forgot, we'll double back real quick. Go to 1 Maccabees. 1 Maccabees chapter 4, and I want verse 52.
The book of 1 Maccabees chapter 4 and verse 52. Now the 25th day of the 9th month, which is called the month Caselu.
Which is called the month Caselu. The month Caselu is the 9th month of the year. Go back to 2 Maccabees chapter 1, verse 9 again.
The book of 2 Maccabees, chapter 1 and verse 9.
Read.
And now see that ye keep the feast of tabernacles in the month Caslu.
Now, if we know that the tabernacles is in the 7th month, and we know that Caslu is the 9th month, what is this talking about here? Well, give me chapter 10. Give me chapter 10. This is talking about the dedication. Why is the dedication being called the tabernacles here? We're going to find out. 10 and 6. Start at 5.
The book of 2 Maccabees, chapter 10, verse 5. Now upon the same day that the strangers profaned the temple.
The strangers being the so-called white man, Edom, the Greeks, read.
On the very same day, it was cleansed again.
On the very same day, the temple was cleansed again. Read.
Even the 25th day of the same month.
Read.
Which is Caslu.
Which is the 9th month of the year. Can you read?
And they kept 8 days with gladness.
They kept 8 days with gladness. They kept the dedication for 8 days with gladness. Read.
As in the Feast of Tabernacles.
The same way that they kept the Feast of Tabernacles. They modeled the dedication after the Tabernacles. The Tabernacles is 8 days. Guess what? The Feast of Dedication, Hanukkah, the Feast of Lights is 8 days, yo. 8 days. Finish the verse out.
Remembering that not long afore they had held the Feast of Tabernacles, when as they wandered in the mountains and dens like beasts.
When they wandered in the mountains and in the dens like beasts. So why do we keep the tabernacles? Because I know some Israelites will say they don't have to keep the tabernacles because it's not written in Leviticus 23. It's not a high holy day given to us by God. Well, why do we keep the tabernacles? Give me Matthew chapter 18, verse 18 real quick.
The book of Matthew chapter 18, verse 18.
Read.
Verily I say unto you, whatsoever ye shall bind on earth shall be bound in heaven.
Whatsoever you shall bind in earth will be bound in heaven. Read.
And whatsoever ye shall loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven.
In case you didn't know, Hanukkah, the Feast of Lights, the Feast of Dedication, that was bound in the earth, yo. So it's bound in the heavens. And in case you forgot, go back to 1 Maccabees chapter 1 and verse 59 real quick. Excuse me, chapter 4 and verse 59.
The book of 1 Maccabees chapter 4 and verse 59.
Read.
Verse 59. Moreover, Judas and his brethren, with the whole congregation of Israel, ordained.
They did what?
Ordained.
They ordained. He commanded. This was an order. This is something that they bound in earth. Let's see what they ordained. Let's see what they bound. Read.
That the days of the dedication of the altar.
That the days of the dedication of the altar. The days of the dedication of the altar. Those 8 days. That's the Feast of Dedication. That's Hanukkah. That's the Feast of Lights. Keep reading.
Should be kept in their season from year to year by the space of 8 days.
By the space of 8 days. Read.
From the 25th day of the month Caslu.
From the 25th day of the 9th month. Read.
With mirth and gladness.
With mirth and with gladness. This has been bound in the earth. And what's bound in earth is bound in heaven. Also, give me 1 Peter chapter 2. 1 Peter chapter 2 and verse 21. If you believe in Christ, you're going to walk as Christ walked. Read that real quick.
The book of 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 21. Verse 21. For even hereunto were ye called, because Christ also suffered for us.
Read.
Leaving us an example.
Leaving us an example. Read.
That ye should follow his steps.
That you should follow his steps. 1 John 2 and 6. Christ left us an example. We are to follow his steps. We are to walk as he walked. Read that real quick.
The book of 1 John chapter 2 verse 6. He that saith he abideth in him.
If any man say he abideth in the Christ, read.
Or himself also so to walk.
You got to follow his steps. Read.
Even as he walked.
You have to follow his steps. You have to walk even as Christ walked. Now let's see if Christ kept the dedication. St. John chapter 10. Because I know Negroes are preparing for Christmas and New Year's. Let's see if Christ prepared for the New Year's. Oh, yeah. Some Negroes preparing for Kwanzaa. Let's see if Christ prepared for those holidays. Read this real quick.
St. John chapter 10 and verse
22.
In verse 22. And it was at Jerusalem, the feast of the dedication.
The feast of what?
The feast of the dedication.
Keep reading.
and it was winter.
And it was winter. Read.
And Jesus walked in the temple of Solomon's porch.
So Christ himself kept the feast of dedication. If you say you believe in Christ, you are to walk as Christ walked. You are to follow his steps. And Christ kept the dedication, yo. He kept Hanukkah, the feast of lights. Now with that, I'm done. You got something you want to say? Hey, well, we're going to end this thing in the same way that we began this thing. And that's by giving all praises, all honor, all glory to the Most High God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob through his only begotten Son, Jesus the Christ.
Right.
Secondly, I want to say to all my brothers, all of my sisters out there, Shalom. My name is Chief Priest Lithiyel Ben Israel.
And Shalom Israel, my name is Priest Ron Ben Israel. Go ahead and close it up. Alright. Like usual, go ahead and follow us on our social media platform. Holy Nation of Israel on Facebook. Holy Nation of Israel on Instagram. Straitgateofisrael on YouTube. And also you can find me on Facebook at Ron Ben Israel.
Find me on Facebook at Lithiyel Ben Israel.
And like always, with our platform, feel free to like, share, subscribe, and comment. Like Free say, follow.
Yep.
Because the Edomites, they hate that day that you helping Holy Nation Israel spread the gospel on the internet. And with that, I'm going to say shalom.
Shalom, Israel. Shalom.